Hi there. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we'll be doing an analysis and valuation of Malibu boats. And I want to keep this one brief, so let's just hop right on. Malibu Boats is a company that sells boats, to no one's surprise. And I just want to jump straight into the financials here because I think their business model is fairly straightforward in the fact that they make and sell the boats. So let's see what it's all about. Now, recently they released their third quarter results for fiscal 2023, and you see an increase of basically everything. So the net sales are up, the volume is up, and the net sales per unit is up, which is cool. So the average price per unit is higher now, which also means, for example, that they're able to pass at least some cost of inflation down to the consumer, right? If all of a sudden their goods or whatever they're using to build the boats is more expensive, they can just increase the price of the boats, and that will actually be paid by the consumer rather than them, right? So that's pretty good. They can weather some of the cost of inflation. And here in their annual report, you can sort of see that there's an overall increase in net sales, there's an overall increase in volume, in fully distributed net income, and in net sales per unit. This has been just constantly increasing, even pre high inflation, as we've seen in the last 2 years. So this is pretty good. And if we see at the full statement of income, then we'll see that actually they have their revenue, most of it goes away before gross profit, right? About 75% of revenue is taken away by the cost of sales. So their gross profit margin would be about 25.5%. And then if you take away sort of the operating expenses, you're left with an operating margin of 17.6%. So they actually operate at fairly low levels of cost of operations, all things considered. And then you take a few more things, and their net income margin actually ends up being 13.5%, which has been improving actually since 2020. You went from 9.9% of revenue being turned to net income to 12.3% to 13.5%. Same with operating margin here, 13%, 16.2%, and now 17.6% of revenue being turned into operating income. So you have improving margins, you have a boat company that makes every boat that also has decently high margins. So that's good to know. It has double digits. So this is good looking so far. And nothing causes me pause because everything is increasing, right? And I want to forecast free cash flow here. I think it's important to sort of have a good free cash flow forecast if you want to know how much a company is actually worth. So the revenue estimate, the way I'm going to do it is first I'm going to get how much of the free cash flow or how much of the revenue is turned to free cash flow at the end of the day. So what I'm doing here is I am just taking an average over the years. So I'm going to say that revenue, the 9% of revenue is turned to free cash flow, right? It's sort of a lower estimate average of the numbers I have over here, where you have 9%, 9.3%, 8%, 10.6%, and 9% again. So I'm just going to say it's 9% just to be a little bit conservative. And in order to forecast revenue in the next 2 years, I'm going to just go to Yahoo Finance to the analysis part. And you see that 7 analysts have analyzed Malibu Boats. The average estimate for net income, or net revenue rather, next year is $1.34 billion. The lowest estimate is 1.33, and then for the next year they're all forecasting a little bit of a downturn. So the lowest estimate is $1.17 billion for the revenue for 2024. I'm going to take this lowest estimate just to be extra conservative, right? But it's not that far off from the average estimate, which is pretty good because it shows that at least all the analysts are living in the same world, more or less. So I can plug all of this in to a discounted cash flow model, and plugging all this in with a required rate of return of 11%, that's 1% more per year than the market, and over time that compounds to be a lot. And a perpetual growth rate at 2%, they're growing 2% for eternity basically, divided by the total number of shares out, gives me a fair value of equity for Malibu Boats of $57.79. And then we have to include their net debt position, which actually is net cash in this example. And it's just a little bit of net cash, but that would increase the value slightly to $57.99. So that's what they're theoretically worth, right? Now, what's the price of Malibu boats? Interesting. So we have it at $55.77 right now. It clearly has had a little bit of a downturn since 2021. It reached the almost $90 and averaged sort of a price of $75 for a while. Now it's been in a little bit of a downturn relative to previous years, but clearly it's still interesting. It's at a P ratio of 6.77. The market cap is 1.15 billion, so it's not that big of a company, honestly. So Malibu boats can be very interesting. But before you consider Malibu boats, I think there's something we need to talk about, which is these two sort of scenarios for it. One of them is that if Malibu Boats stays a high growth company, right? You saw that revenue increasing, you saw those margins getting better, you saw that net income increasing, and that net income per unit too. If it stays a high growth company with with average yearly growth rates of 4 to 5%, for example, the business will be able to weather fluctuations in stock price, right? Right now you see a lot of ups and downs, I think you want to focus on that big picture. Are they able to grow in that big picture very consistently, right? A lot of sales growth has happened through acquisitions. Can they keep this going healthily? So essentially, a lot of their new sales are because they have acquired other boat making companies, and those are the sales that are driving growth, right? So can they now either stop the acquisitions or slow them down and just grow organically? Do they have to acquire more companies in order to do that? And if so, how much is it going to cost? Will they have to take out debt? What is the cost of acquiring other companies? They don't have net debt at the moment, and stock buybacks means that the shareholder gets some direct return. And then if all this is true and holds true, then Malibu Boats is potentially undervalued, right? We got a value of pretty much almost $58. Right now it's at 55.5. So it's not that far off, right? However, there are some possible roadblocks to cash flow. Increased capital expenditures for new factories could decrease total free cash flow. They did say that they're interested in building new factories or in finding new acquisitions. So if they're making new factories, if they're making new sort of supply chain stuff, that'll be part of their capital expenditures. And that means more capital expenditures means that there will be less free cash flow if free cash flow is cash from operations minus capital expenditures. So this is something to keep an eye out for because it can completely change that free cash flow forecast that I just showed. Malibu Boats is also incredibly sensitive to economic downturns and would be incredibly hurt by a recession. If this is true, then Malibu Boats would be either fairly valued or slightly overvalued. So it's just very important, and you have to keep an eye out for growth. Essentially, it's very easy for me to just say, oh, Malibu Boats has been a high grower. They're going to keep growing by 45% per year. But there's more nuance in that, right? All of a sudden, if they're spending on sort of new equipment plants, then they may not grow at 4 to 5% per year. This may not be true at all. So it's important to keep an eye out for growth because even if the revenue is growing, maybe their free cash flow is not growing if there's increased capital expenditures, or maybe they will slow down significantly during an economic downturn because people will stop buying boats if all of a sudden they can't get food on their plates. So you have to keep a very keen eye out for these like high moat but also highly sensible to macroeconomics companies because they can truly change based on the global financial situation. So yeah, just keep an eye out. But otherwise, I truly hope that you found this video interesting. And with that said, if you liked what you saw, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell button to get notifications whenever I post a new video. If you want me to analyze a stock, request it down below. With that said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.